We talked about Zacchaeus last week, Luke chapter 19. So let's go back there for just a moment because it leads into the next lesson. So back in Luke 19, very beginning of that chapter. Luke 19 and the very beginning of it. We mentioned about Jesus, of course, is on his way to Jerusalem. He is coming down to, a very short time left in his life. He knows that he has a destiny at Jerusalem. Of course, Jericho is on the way to Jerusalem. And there he sees Zacchaeus and tells Zacchaeus that he must stay at his house. Jesus invited himself to Zacchaeus' house. I think that's about the only time in the New Testament where we see Jesus inviting himself to be a guest. I would assume that means it was pretty important that he go to be with Zacchaeus. And of course, some of the Jewish people, the Jewish leaders, complained because Zacchaeus, they said, was a sinner. And we talked last week about, Zacchaeus was a tax collector and a chief tax collector, and was obviously very wealthy. The Bible says he was rich, and so many of the Jewish people said he was a sinner for what he did for a living and the fact that he was rich and all that. And Zacchaeus responded, of course, that he had tried to do right. He had gave goods to the poor and helped people who were poor. If he had defrauded anybody, he had repaid them. And Jesus responded in verses 9 and 10 that today salvation has come to this house because he also is the son of Abraham. Zacchaeus was Jewish. He had that Jewish background. And it says he's also a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. And there we have the mission statement of Jesus. That's why he came into the world. And that last statement has a lot to do with what is just going to happen next. Now, he said this to all these people, that my mission was to come to seek and save that which was lost. He heads on to Jerusalem in a minute, and people still have misconceptions. Even though Jesus said, this is why I came. I came to save people who were lost. But they misinterpret. They have preconceived ideas about what Jesus was going to do. And we see that happening in the very next section. Luke chapter 19, verse 11, starts talking about a parable that he has told in other places, and it's about the kingdom. The people, we've talked in here many times about how even his disciples had misconceptions about the kingdom, what it was going to be like, what Jesus was going to do, all that. They had misconceptions about it. So he had just told them that he came to seek and save that which was lost. So now he tells them a parable about the kingdom, one aspect of it anyway, and what that parable teaches about the kingdom. All right? So he spoke another parable because he was near Jerusalem, and because they thought, almost all of the followers thought this, even his close disciples thought it, that the kingdom of God would appear immediately. So there was one misconception. All right? There was one misconception that the people had, was that the kingdom of God would appear immediately. And so he tries to set them, straight about what was going to happen, what the kingdom was like. And again, any one parable doesn't teach the whole truth about everything. It just zeroes in, on a main idea. So the people thought that the kingdom of God would appear immediately. So he tells them a parable. A certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return. Okay? So this, we already get some insight about what he's going to talk about. So he's talking about going, he's using an example. All the people at that time knew about noblemen, they knew about kingdoms. That was just a part of everyday life. And so he's using that to teach a lesson about what his kingdom was going to be like. He says, you know about noblemen, you know about kingdoms. Of course, at that time, people like Herod and Pilate and other rulers would go, since the Roman government was the world empire, they could go to Rome and receive a kingdom. And so the people then knew all about going to the emperor, going to the main ruler, and receiving a kingdom. So Jesus said, I'm going to use a little story to teach you a lesson about my kingdom. So he said, this nobleman went to a far country, went a long ways, right? Went a long ways to go to receive this kingdom. And to receive a kingdom and to return. And to return. Okay? That's a critical part of this parable too. It's not just about receiving the kingdom, but it's about coming back. So this is what he did. He said he called 10 of his servants and delivered to them 10 minas, is how the New King James refers to it. Anywhere, it was about 100 denarii, and most people made about 1 denarii a day, so that's about 3 months' salary in that neighborhood, 100 days, so about 3 months' worth of a regular day's wage. So that's what a mina was, okay? So he delivered to them 10 minas and said to them, do business till I come. See, he was going to be gone way off into a far country, so they didn't know how long he was going to be gone. But since it was a far country, it was going to take a while. So he says, while I'm gone, I'm giving you this money, all right? He says, and while I'm gone, I want you to do business with it. So he wants them to use it wisely, make good investments, so when he comes back, he has a good return. And again, he's making an application between an earthly kingdom, which is about, money and doing business and all that, and his kingdom. So that's what he says. Okay, do business till I come. But it says his citizens hated him. All right? And sent a delegation after him saying, we will not have this man to reign over us. They didn't want him, did they? Didn't want him to be the ruler, the man that reigned over him. Because remember, these people, again, people he's talking to, thinks that when Jesus is going to go to Jerusalem, he's going to set up an earthly kingdom. Like we've talked in here many times. That's their perception. It's a misconception, but that's what it is. They think that, see, they're all going to follow him. There's this big multitude, and they're going to follow Jesus to Jerusalem, which is just a few more miles. And when he gets there, he's going to set up this great kingdom in Jerusalem, and he's going to reign over it. And so soon as he gets to Jerusalem, which would be a matter of days, they think that all of this is going to come to a culmination. And they'll be there kind of on the ground floor to see this new kingdom and see a new king crowned. That's their misconception. And so before he ever gets there, he tells this parable to try and get the people to understand that's not what's going to happen. Okay? It's not going to happen. But of course, in a few weeks when we talk about Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, they were still thinking about a physical kingdom. They still thought he was going to, set up and be an earthly king. So he tells them this parable to try and get them to understand that when he gets to Jerusalem, there's not going to be this big crowning ceremony with him being an earthly king sitting on a physical throne in Jerusalem. trying to get them to understand that. Well, in this parable, he says his citizens hated him. And, of course, we know that's exactly what happened. All right? The Jewish people, they hated Jesus. The vast majority of them would not accept him as the Messiah because of their misconception. They would have taken Jesus just like that if he would have came with great power and set up a real powerful earthly kingdom. They would have been all over him. But they ended up hating him because that's not what he did. Even though he told them over and over and over again, I'm not going to do that, so don't expect it. But yet when he didn't do it, and he told them what kind of Messiah he was, he just said, I came to seek and save that which was lost. I'm not concerned about setting up a new political kingdom or a political rule. It says, I'm not going to do that. People are still looking for a Messiah to do that, aren't they? Set up a political rule. All about, having a political type kingdom in Jerusalem. Yes. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight's lesson is about when the New Testament talks about the Israel of God, who are they talking about? Because the world, most of the religious world says it's the Jewish people today. And that's the Israel of God. But we'll see in the Bible that that's not even close to the truth. And that's tonight's lesson is about the Israel of God. And that's exactly right. I mean, people have these terrible misconceptions about God's plan for Israel. They think that there's a plan for the church and a totally different plan for Israel. God's going to save them in an entirely different way, going to save the Jews an entirely different way, and going to do all that. It's amazing how people in seminaries teach that over and over and over again. I've been reading that all week long about how people do that. I mean, it's just amazing. It's almost scary in a sense how people are picking out the Jews that God's going to do something special and there's all this plan. When Jesus made it crystal clear to the Jews of the first century that all of that was a major misconception. That they were totally wrong. Yes?
He plainly told us there's no way through to God except through me.
That's right. Plain as day.
And they,
yeah.
Not saying they're a large percent of them.
Yeah.
They become Christians.
Yeah.
But there's even a larger percent that turns their back and went the other way.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. He did everything he could to make it clear. He really did. But it just shows that when people have preconceived ideas that are really, really strong, it's very, very difficult to ever get beyond those. Okay? It goes back to people's attitude, their honesty, their sincerity, their willingness to listen to the truth, like sending those verses to the person. Well, yeah, that's what it says, but yeah, right. There's a but that always follows it. Yeah, I see where it says that, but there's always something after that. And that's the way it was in the first century. Jesus said those things, but they've been expecting this, or a Jewish rabbi taught that, or there was always something after that people kept going back to. And just think about all the different times Jesus has told his followers or told the Jewish people about why he came into the world and what he was going to do, and during his trial he talks about what his purpose was, and that he wasn't going to come to be an earthly king. I mean, he just made that as clear as day. Yes.
He looked at the number of cases he even had his disciples when he talked about the pearl. They still weren't. He had to explain to them what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And he does that. That's why he's telling this parable, because he's teaching something else about the kingdom. He's trying to get them to understand that when I go to Jerusalem, I'm not setting up here in a few days. I'm not setting up some earthly kingdom there that I'm going to reign from, some physical throne. He says, I'm not going to do it. So he teaches them in a parable about this nobleman, which of course is himself, and he's going to go into a far country, and in that case, of course, it's heaven. And we read, it was prophesied way back in Daniel that, one like the Son of Man was going to go to the Ancient of Days and receive a kingdom. Well, of course, that's what Jesus is going to do. But he's not going to go do that. He's not going to set up some physical kingdom in Jerusalem. He's going to have to go to the Father to receive the kingdom. He's not going to receive a kingdom in Jerusalem. The kingdom he receives, like Galatians chapter 4 talks about, the Jerusalem that's from above. That's the one that's important nowadays. The Jerusalem on earth has no importance whatsoever. The Jerusalem that's above, that's a different story. In Galatians chapter 4, that story about Hagar and Sarah, it makes that very, very clear. That it's the Jerusalem from above that's important. God has no plans for Jerusalem on earth whatsoever. It's just another city like New York or St. Louis or anything else. It's just a city on earth that has people living in it. That's it. There's nothing holy about it. You won't go there and be any holier than anywhere else. There's no holy artifacts. There's no holy temple. There's nothing holy there, period. It was all that went away in the first century. And there's nothing been special about it since. And think about the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that have been killed because of those misconceptions about Jerusalem. Oh, it's been who knows how many over the past 2,000 years. And none of that was necessary if people would have read this. Not a single person would have ever had to lose their life because of those misconceptions if they would have read this book. But they relied on traditions or what parents said or whoever. And again, Jesus did everything he could to help people understand what was going to happen. Just like this parable and just like all the others that he talks about the kingdom. Because this guy, and it was him, he was going to have to go into a far country, go into heaven, just like Daniel prophesied, and receive that kingdom. And then he was going to return to take his people back to heaven with him. Not come and set up another kingdom. So, it talked about the citizens hating in verse 15. And so it was that when he returned, having received the kingdom, here's the day of accounting. Here's what did people do while he was gone. Okay, what did they do? And just like today, people do different things with what they have. He commanded his servants to whom he had given the money to be called to him that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. So the first came saying, Master, your mina has earned 10 minas. And he said to him, Well done, good servant, because you were faithful in a very little, have authority over 10 cities. And again, he's making, we're not supposed to get the idea that he's going to give us a physical city to reign over on earth. That's not the point of the parable at all. So he says, you've been faithful in a very little, so have authority over 10 cities. Second one, similar, Master, your mina has earned 5 minas, and so you'll also be over 5 cities. And then another came, saying, Master, here's your mina, which I've kept put away in a handkerchief. For I feared you, because you're an austere man, or a severe man. You collect what you did not deposit and reap what you did not sow. Remember, he's been gone. Right? In the parable, this man's been gone for a fairly long period of time. So he wasn't physically there to make deposits or to do the sowing. He left that with his servants to do. That was their job while he was gone. See, he gave them his money. It wasn't their money. They didn't have any of that money. It was his money. And he knew he was going to have to be gone for a long time. And so he left it with them. And again, it wasn't any of their money, that he wanted to see how trustworthy they were, how faithful they were, how good a steward they were while he was gone. And so, they only picks out 3 people. There's obviously a lot more than 3, but 3 representative people. 2 of them were faithful. That's what it amounts to. They were faithful people. They knew that they had no idea when the ruler would return. So they, lived every day preparing for that, being faithful, using what had been given to them, except this last guy. He didn't. And so the ruler responds, verse 22, out of your own mouth I will judge you. From what you had just said, I'm going to judge you. You wicked servant. I think some translations have the word evil there. You evil servant. You knew that I was an austere man. You knew that before I ever left. Collecting what I did not deposit and reaping what I did not sow. So you knew I was leaving it with you because I was going to be gone. I wasn't going to be physically here in this country, so you had the responsibility to do those things, to be faithful and to take care of what I'd left you. Why then did you not put my money in the bank? And in there weren't any banks in the first century, but there were money lenders and money changers that essentially did the same thing. So why didn't you do that? That at my coming I might have collected with interest, that at least there had been some. That would have been a faithful thing to do, a wise thing to do. So, and he said to those who stood by, take the mina from him and give it to him who has 10. Well, the people standing by thought that was crazy, but they said to him, Master, he has 10. He already has 10. Why are you giving him any more? Well, verse 26 says, for I say to you that everyone who has will be given, and from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. Because he wasn't faithful. He'd given him so much that those that weren't faithful with what they had, he says, I want to take from them. Remember, he tells some other parables about the fact that we don't know when he's coming back. And there's a purpose behind that. So, we don't know when he's coming back. It might be today. We might be gone for many, many years before he comes back. The point is, we're to be faithful, regardless. Okay? Because we don't know when he's coming back. See, these people had misconceptions. He's trying to clear up some of those. And one of those things he's trying to clear up is you don't know. You don't know times. You don't know when these things are going to happen. So take what God is giving you and use it. Use it wisely. Use it, resourcefully. Be thoughtful about what you do with your money and help people with it. And, that's why God allows you to be blessed, right? 1 Timothy chapter 6 talks about the rich people and what are they supposed to do? Realize that you have money to help those who don't. So, that's the kind of life you're supposed to live. God blesses you so you can bless other people. And don't expect to be blessed if you're not willing to bless people and help people. He says, don't expect it. So then at the very end he says, but bring here those enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them and slay them before me. And again, we talk about all those Jewish people who totally rejected him, who didn't believe in him. We talked about that a little while ago. They didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. And it was because he didn't fit their idea of the Messiah. And think about how today so many people won't accept Jesus for that reason, because he's not the kind of Jesus they want. They want a Jesus that's going to do this for them, do that for them, allow them to live any type of life they want. So they won't accept the real Jesus because he's not the kind of Jesus they want. So they just don't believe in him. Well, that's what the Jews did. Jesus was not the Jesus they wanted. They wanted some powerful human ruler that came with, great power and would set up this amazing kingdom and take everything back from the Romans. And he didn't do any of that. So because he wasn't the type of Messiah they wanted, then they didn't believe him. Even though He fit every prophecy exactly from their own Scriptures. He fit every one of them exactly to the letter. Because He wasn't what they wanted Him to be, they just ignored all those. And it just shows people are exactly the same today. Right? When it comes to churches or whatever, a lot of people today want churches that just make them feel good about their lives and tell them they can continue to live any way they want. And hey, that's some feel-good stuff right there. But see, that's just like the Jews. The Jews wanted a Jesus who would give them their freedom back, make them a big, powerful nation again, like during the days of David and Solomon. And Jesus said, I'm not doing that. My kingdom is not of this world. So they said, no, thank you. And that's what people today are saying. They're saying, no, thank you. I don't want that type of church. I'd have to change my ways if I did that. And I'm not going to do it. I'll come and I'll be there as long as you don't ask anything of me. I can continue to live exactly like I've always lived, and you won't bother me. You won't ask me to do anything. I'll come. Well, that's not the church Jesus established. There are churches like that in the world, but it's not the real one. And so things haven't changed in 2,000 years. I mean, it's exactly the same thing. People want a certain kind of Jesus. They want a certain type of church. And they'll just keep looking for that type of Jesus or that type of church until they find it. When they find it, they'll be satisfied. But just like these people Jesus talks about in this verse, because they wouldn't accept Him, the real Messiah, He was going to slay them. Of course, this is all talking about the day of judgment. And that's what He's going to do. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. He's going to take vengeance on those who know not God and who do not obey the gospel. So things haven't changed. They're exactly the same. Just exactly the same as in the first century. Unfortunately, it's the same. We would like for it not to be the same. I would love for people to know what the real Jesus is like, but it's not the one they're looking for. It's not. Same way with the church. I'd love to have this church overflowing, but most people don't want the church that Jesus built, and that's not what they want. And so they just go find something else. That doesn't allow us to change who Jesus is. Present a different Jesus to them. Paul was, talked to some of the Galatian churches about that in Galatians chapter 1, 6 through 9, about a different gospel. Well, it's like saying a different Jesus, a different church. There's one, and you and I don't have any power or authority to change who Jesus is, to change what the church is, to change the gospel at all. We have no power to change that whatsoever. And if we attempt to do that, just like these people, the day of judgment will be a harsh day for us. It will. Well, we're about out of time. Any comments about this? Anything else? Great lesson. A superb lesson from Jesus here that, even though it was given almost 2,000 years ago, is just so relevant for us today. Tremendously relevant. All right, well, we'll plan on starting then. Verse 28, or in that neighborhood, next week. I think that's where we go next week. Let me see. Nope. We will go to John chapter 11 next week. John chapter 11. Wasn't sure what happened next. John chapter 11, and beginning in about verse 55. Yeah. This is when the Passover is near and Jesus is on His way to Jerusalem to observe the Passover. So we're getting down close to that last week of Jesus' life. Very close to it. John chapter 11, Lord willing, next week at verse 55.